All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Experience Matters. We have Ken Peterson on the show again, so you already know it's going to be a good one. Ken
I'll
is
try.
our president. Ken is our president of CX for Question Pro, and pretty much a guru in the whole CX industry. Yeah, how's it going, Ken?
Good, good. I'm glad to be back, and hope I can share some nuggets of wisdom. I have some interesting things to show and talk about. So,
Yeah, yeah. So for all of y'all who have joined, we had a session. I think it was a few weeks ago, about 3 weeks ago, with Ken. I've gotten a lot of feedback that it was very insightful, very helpful. So that was on transaction versus relationship NPS studies. When do you launch? Which one and how do you go about, and the do's and don'ts, right, for launching the two types of studies. So
exactly.
today's topic is going to be all about ROI of your CX program, right? So, our main goals are one, hopefully, to convince you why it's important to calculate the ROI of your CX program. Where do you start, and how do you go about calculating this ROI? And I mean, third and probably the most important thing is how not to overcomplicate the calculation, kind of break it down for you, make it as simple as possible so that you can go back to senior management, you can get leadership buy-in if you have that ROI that's already been calculated for your program.
Exactly.
Yeah. Do you want to kick it off, Ken?
Yeah, and I don't like to start these discussions with a bunch of PowerPoint slides, but in that spirit, I'll share a bunch of PowerPoint slides. I wanted to show these to you because I think one of the things that happens, and it happens all too often, is people try to overcomplicate it. And so I'm actually showing
Yeah.
something that I put together, what, 20, well, actually 22 years ago was the first time we used this model. And it really, it looks complicated, and it's really not that complicated. But when you start looking at, oh, well, here's this, and then here's this next thing in terms of getting the ROI out of the presentation, if it will click.
Yeah.
It's been paused for a few
Do you want me to
moments.
let me just add it to stream? Let me
Add
see.
it. Yeah,
There you go.
there it goes. So oops, we went too far on that one. So even when we look at this model and then say, each one of these actually has a component that is just so much more than even that one, huge model and everything. And this was our ROI model in 1998 when we first rolled it out with a company I was with, and it looks complicated, but it really, what we're trying to answer that question is, does satisfying customers equal profit? And
Yeah.
I can say definitively it does. And this particular model here, we actually had this the simplified view of it that people could understand and say, okay, yeah, this makes sense to me, but hey, that's only $14. That's $14 per guest. But if you started, taking that and saying a 5% top box lift, well, that's 50 million in additional revenue. And that was just one component. We had components about employees, we had components about out of stocks. This is a retailer. So, there was a lot of components to this where we could actually show a raise in revenue, a reduction in costs, things like that. And so, really all your ROI model is gains from the investment minus the cost of the investment divided by the cost of the investment. And I think in this case, when we were talking about that $50 million gain, they were spending a little under 500,000, I want to say,
Mm.
on on probably about 20 programs across the business. And so, 500,000 to 50 million, I would take that investment every day. It's even
Yeah.
better than my
Yeah.
Bitcoin, shall I say?
Yeah.
So,
No, because even the model that you shared, right? It's fair enough to say if you present your screen and then there is just so much on the slide, nobody can read anything. It's safe to say
yeah,
your models are
exactly.
fairly too complicated. So, yeah,
Yeah,
that calculation at the end definitely simplifies it.
yeah, and that's, that's ultimately what people need to see. It's just, I just need to see, does it, does it pay itself off? And one of the things I'll
Yeah.
say with, when it comes to Sorry. I'm trying to stop the share. I think it's stopped sharing on your side.
It's tough.
So,
Yeah, yeah,
okay, good. But when when we're starting to talk about ROI, I mean, there's just so many places that you can get it. Um,
yeah.
all too often, we try to create models like that, and it's too much overkill. And really, there's a lot of areas where you can start to find ROI in customer experience. And I mean, look no further than that. We know that delighted customers spend more. We know that.
Mm,
And sometimes it's so small, $14 seems like nothing, but
yeah.
man, that's something when you start adding it up across an entire organization. I mean, we were talking returns on a store that, we're matching 5 to 10% of their sales. And
Yeah,
that's nothing insignificant to see that kind of growth. And then
absolutely.
there's
Yeah.
also the lifetime value.
Mm,
People that are coming in shopping with your store, if it's a business to business environment, it doesn't matter what environment it is. If they feel they're
mm,
going to be treated well, they're going to spend more over their lifetime. And
mhm.
there are places where people no longer become customers, but
Yeah, yeah,
um,
yeah.
I can think of certain things like hey, someone who runs a maternity store, you shouldn't expect to have that same customer for the rest of their life.
Yeah,
There's
yeah,
only so many
yeah.
years there. So there's a lot of that's one area, and that's what those few slides were really showing. But there's a lot more than that.
Yeah, yeah. So where really, so everyone who's joining, in and around their research industry, CX leads, people who are running an entire team, where do they start really? What is the first thing that they need to do if they wanted to build this out and calculate what their ROI is?
Yeah, I mean, the best thing to do is first of all think about the customers you're impacting with this and what would
Yeah.
happen. I mean, there are cases of when we talk about that gain in investment, it really comes in two ways. It can come
Mm,
in increased revenue or decreased cost. Both of those are positive. And so when you
mm,
start looking at those two elements, it really comes in a lot of ways. I have first of all, we know loyal customers give you greater share. And if they're
yeah.
ultra loyal, as I like to call them, my friend Tim Cunningham, guru in the industry, smartest man I know in terms of CX. I mean, he wrote a book called Wallet Allocation Rule. Ironically, we were talking earlier about acronyms. It's WAR, and the
Yeah.
subtext said, declare war on your competitors, and that's really what it's about. It's about reducing the competitive set that they'll consider, and that's as
Sorry,
applicable as
what is the full form of what?
the acronym is Wallet Allocation Rule.
Okay. Hmm.
And it's as applicable to Question Pro as it is to a retailer, in that
Hmm.
the more the more of your competitors that a customer will consider, the less likely they're going to give you, the less share they're going to give you. Just, I mean,
Yeah.
I mean, it was sort of an accidental stumble that he came across, but
Yeah.
that's one of
Yeah.
those ways. I mean, when we talk about return on investment, if you're able to eliminate, what customers will consider in their competitive set
Hmm.
because of what you're doing, you're
Hmm.
going to see that share increase. And that's probably one of the strongest measures, but there's a lot more than that. So,
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Fair enough. And so, if where do you really need? You don't really need leadership buy-in to go about doing this exercise, right?
no, there's so many places. Let's reflect on NPS.
Yeah.
Just for a moment, take those detractors, and one of the key elements there is closed loop feedback, and that's one of those
Yeah.
things that everyone in our industry should be advocating,
Yeah.
because it's easy to say, hey, you can go into your customer base and you can
Hmm.
look and say, okay, we have 100,000 customers and 5,000 have defected this year, and you can put a
Yeah.
cost to that. And it
Yeah.
doesn't matter what that they might have been happy customers, unhappy customers, or somewhere in between, but you lost 5,000 customers of those 100,000. So you
Yeah.
lost 5% of your customers, and there's a value associated with them. You
Yeah.
can estimate how much profit they represent to your company. You can estimate the cost very quickly and very easily. I mean, any good retailer, any good hotel company, any good airline will say our average customer value is X dollars. And you can say 5,000 customers times X dollars. And that's right there. That's detractor recovery, being able to say, if we just retain those customers,
Yeah.
that's the value.
Yeah.
And that's the
Yeah.
increased revenue that we'll get from doing that. And I would say if you take 5,000 customers and they were $1,000 each, suddenly, you're getting
Yeah.
up there,
It
and
adds up.
yeah, it adds up really quick.
Yeah, and the rewards, it just the time and the investment that's required to build this entire detractor recovery or the closed loop mechanism, the benefits just far outweigh, putting in that investment and that time to building out that entire program, right?
I would say in a general, even if we never measured anything, even if you just had a system that said, hey, this customer hasn't come back in X number of weeks, X number of months, we should, contact them. And I
Yeah.
have a great story about that. But, if they haven't come back in X number of weeks, and you contact them and you recover them, that cost, I mean, we're talking hundreds of fold in terms of
Yeah.
the revenue that you increase. And I know you've heard this one before, so I'm sorry that you have to hear these stories over and over again. But
I love listening to the stories, Ken. So yes. Please
It
go
was a
ahead.
car rental agency. I was
Yeah.
there every week. I was back and forth every week, flying in, picking up a car Monday, dropping it off Friday. Got a survey every week. At one point, the service was fine. I mean, I usually didn't even interact with anyone, but I did have a problem. I
Yeah.
filled out the survey. I got a little note back that was auto generated that said, hey, we're sorry for your experience. Take $20 off on your next rental. And I thought, I've been renting here for I think at that point it was like 25, 30 weeks straight. You would think
Mm-hmm.
someone would have said, wow, this guy, we probably should call him or something. So I
Yeah.
continue to do that just to see if someone would notice and see if someone would, at some point. So I kept giving a I'm sorry for that station manager, because I know he got yelled at for the bad scores, but I just kept doing it. I'm like, someone should notice. And it wasn't until I stopped going. Now, again, it was one of these cases where it wasn't anything they could have done, but I did eventually stop going to that location and to that station. So about 8 weeks after my last trip there was the first time I got a phone call from someone
Yeah.
saying, hey, we noticed that you haven't been renting anymore. And I'm like, did you get any of my survey feedback? Oh,
Yeah.
no, why?
Yeah.
And it was just complete. There was a complete disconnect between the two. So
Yeah. Yeah.
detractor recovery is just so important.
Yeah, yeah. And so those are your making sure your detractors, right? They're already high potential of churn, right? Making sure and seeing how you can recover. But even your promoters or even your passives, that whole um, option for upsell, right? Where you
Oh, yeah.
can cross sell. How do you go about calculating that when you're looking at your ROI also, like the potential for upsell there? Because that's where it gets a little tricky, right?
It can get tricky. And part of that is knowing your customers. And that would come back. I mean, you could take that same car rental example and say, would have been a smart move by them is the next time I come into town is maybe upgrade me to an SUV.
Yeah.
And maybe I like it enough that I say, every time I come in, I'm going to pay that extra $20, $30, $40 to get that SUV.
Yeah.
But it comes in identifying what your customers' tendencies are. And if you keep your CX completely disconnected from your CRM, which happens way too often, you're not going to
Yeah.
be able to leverage that. You're not going to be able to say, hey, I know that they're buying A, B, and C. We should, give them D now too. And, look no further. We were talking about Apple computers before, and there are so
Yeah.
many people that will buy the Apple computer, then they'll buy
Yeah.
the iPhone, or maybe
Yeah.
reverse order.
Yeah.
But then it's everything else that they add on to it. I
Yeah.
need the AirPods. I need the AirTags. I need, there's opportunities, but it comes in knowing what your customers want and being able to identify it and offer it to them at the right time. And within CX, you can do that. You can even ask them the question, how can we better serve you? And customers will tell you that.
Exactly. Yep. 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 What else? What else should they be looking at to build into this ROI for their program?
Yeah, I think, I mean, we talked about, delighted customers spending more. We talked about
Yeah.
share. We talked about detractor recovery and cross sell upsell. There's several ones that are sort of, I'll call them second degree.
Okay.
And that really comes, my friend Sonia's ears probably just perked up here because I'm going to talk about employee experience.
Ah, yes.
Because,
Yeah.
and it's sort of like that, it's like, it just keeps tumbling and tumbling, it just keeps building upon itself. It could also destroy itself. If you enable
Mhm.
if you enable employees to take care of customers, they feel empowered and they try to do a better job. There's also the
Mhm.
flip side. If you give them no information and they have no idea if they're doing well or not, and you don't empower them, they don't even try. And,
Yeah.
in both sides, and I'm not talking about the customers and what they do at this point, but I'm talking about employees. Empowered
Yeah.
employees are going to be retained longer. I mean, we're talking about the great resignation here worldwide, about people wanting to do their own thing, not
Mm.
having to, sometimes I know some people in the retail industry that says, I just don't want to put up with customers anymore.
Yeah.
And I get that, but it's because they're feeling like they're not empowered to do anything. And
Yeah.
that's one of those things. It's not going to increase well, it can increase your revenue when you have happy employees. And I mean, way back in 2005, my friend Tim and I wrote an article about the connection between employee satisfaction, customer satisfaction, and store revenue. And it got published, it got paper of the year. And it was
Wow.
like 10
Nice.
years later, then I saw the first next article about it. I'm like, it took people 10 years to figure this out. Like, everyone knew it
Yeah.
was there, but no one could do it analytically. But there is that reality that when you retain those employees, you're lowering your costs
Yeah.
because you don't have to
Mm.
recruit, you don't have to train. And then even when they train, I mean, I train new employees quite a bit. We're
Yeah.
hiring a lot here at Question Pro, by the way. So, if you ever, if you're looking for an
Side
awesome
note.
career with
Yes.
awesome people, Shibani and I, like, um, we'd love to have you on board. But I mean, yeah, side
Yeah.
note there. But when you're bringing people on board, I mean, it takes time for me to dedicate to training them. It takes
Mhm.
time for that person to get up to speed where they're, really realizing the full potential of their return. So you
Mhm.
start looking at the employee side of things when it comes to customer experience, and there's significant costs. And at one point, we were figuring it out that they say it's one company, it was a retail company. They said, oh, it's costing us about $7,000 every time we train
Hmm.
someone new. And then we started looking at it a little bit deeper, and we're like, no, it's closer to about $50,000
Oof.
when you train someone new, because it's not just that, because
Yeah.
we could pull that connection between the employee satisfaction and the customer satisfaction.
Yeah. 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 So I have, that there are clients with very extensive CX programs in place, right? But not too much action being taken on the feedback that comes in, right? They identify, okay, these are the three areas that they need to work on, but nobody really sees that through. So what and it's going on, business goes on,
Well, it
maybe
goes on,
no
yeah.
significant, yeah, no significant changes in the customer experience, but they still have their loyal customers, and the company chugs along. But what happens really if they don't look at this whole ROI piece? Why is it so important, would you say?
If I like to refer to the example of, you can make every customer happy by having the perfect
Yep.
product and giving it to them for free, but you're not going to make
Mm.
any money. You're going to lose a lot of
Mm.
money. Doesn't matter what
Yeah.
business you're in. Um, Action has to happen, and it has to be, I'll call it deliberate action. You can't just say,
Mm.
oh, well, let's this is the variable that we're going to look at this month. And I mean, I know so many clients that would like, oh, this
Yeah.
variable is showing up in this quadrant, or it's the lowest score, or it's, so we're going to focus on that and improve it, and that's going to improve everything. But does it have ROI? I mean, you
Yeah.
have to
Correct.
really think about that. You have to,
Yeah.
and you pick any random variable out there and say, does it have an ROI? I'm going to
Yeah.
pick one that I know doesn't. Location.
Mhm.
Are you just going to build a new location because customers say it's a mile further away? No, probably not. You know,
Yeah.
the customers are already coming there. Yeah, they'd love the location to be better, but they're coming there. And the cost of building another location, all you have to do is look at Sports Authority in 2006 when they went out of business. They kept building new locations and they overbuilt, and they just basically were taking customers from one store and then spending millions of dollars to build another store, only to retain the same customers that were going to that
Same
first store to
customers.
begin with, you know, and they would tout how
Yeah.
great these new stores are doing. And it's like, no, you're doing it at the expense. So there was no ROI, and they went out of business. They overinvested in real estate, overinvested in building, and are no longer in business. There's other factors involved, competitive pricing pressure, things like that. But there was no, you know, they looked at that one variable and said, you know, if we have locations everywhere, we'll win this game. And they lost big time.
Yeah.
And then you can take something else, and it might seem seemingly innocuous. It could be something as simple as, hey, you know, make sure the doors open when they're supposed to open when you walk up. You know, customer, I see it all the time. My daughter works for a retailer here locally, and she says it's funny when the store closes. You know, they get the hint that the store is closed because they walk up and the doors stay closed. The doors are closed. That's it.
Yeah.
If they walk up and the doors are closed and
Yeah.
the store is open, they might not know the difference. They might be confused. They might think maybe
Yeah.
the holiday party is today. I mean, it is almost Christmas. So, you know, maybe they think, oh, they're having a holiday party. They closed early. And that's a reality. And how much does it cost? How much does it cost to get, you know, $150, $200 to get a guy in to say, we're going to fix this door. We're going to make sure it's doing it correctly. And, you know, in that case, you know, the typical transaction is $200. If you lost 2 transactions because of it, I mean, you've already outspent what you've already lost that investment twice.
Yeah. And it's just, you know, even the examples that you're giving, it's just the small things that you need to consider as well, right? Yes, of course, look at your detractors, your cross-sell, upsell, and then even, you know, experience. That's also a stretch for a lot of companies that don't really look at that now. But there's so many small things that can be taken into account to build out this ROI, which I'm assuming you can improve this ROI calculation over time. You don't have to, you know, start with bringing in all of that information, right?
It doesn't have to be perfect. It usually just has to be enough. I sound like a salesman on the outside now, because it just has to be enough to justify the cost of the program.
Yeah.
And the reality is there's so much more than that. I mean, if you can say, listen, we're going to invest $100,000 in Question Pro, and the net return on that is $500,000. Someone would be stupid not to take that up. But that's just the calculated part. I mean, never mind the fact that, you know, you're doing the right thing by the customers, so they're going to stay more loyal, you know, and those usually, you can only usually calculate that after you've been running the program for a while. Exactly. But you can find some easy things to say, here's what it is. And then, you know, not only are we winning five times our investment just by doing this, we can go back and say, hey, we're also getting more loyal customers. Look at the spend amongst our happy customers. Oh, by the way, look at the number of people saying that they're, you know, giving a recommendation to a friend, being able to say, hey, out there. And even better, of course, you know, you can have them actually proactively, you know, you can push them to a review site when you have a promoter.
Yeah.
I mean, talk about free promotion and, you know, that kind of thing. I mean, there are just so many things that you can do with so many of these programs to just really enhance that return. And, you know, as you build it out, you're going to find more and more, you know, you're going to find more and more of those, oh, we can do this. And by the way, that bottom line, that cost line doesn't even change. You're just finding more ways to improve.
Absolutely. Also, because I like hearing your stories. Do you have, you know, stories of customers of yours who've just gotten it wrong, right? Their approach, things that, you know, they included that they thought, you know, they're calculating a fair enough, realistic ROI for the investments that they're making, but it didn't really give them the whole picture, right?
Yeah, I'll refrain from naming names, although
Of
sometimes,
course.
I
Yeah.
start talking about them and everyone goes, "Oh, I know who did that. Yeah, they were in the news." I'm like, "Yeah, unfortunately, they were my client and they didn't listen very well." We actually have one um, several years ago where we were working with this company and they said, "We want to see ROI on this. How are we getting
Mm,
more profit?" We were talking about measuring call center satisfaction, and they were trying to tie it directly, like rep satisfaction to profit, like,
mm,
and that's probably one of those more challenging situations. I am all for tying something to profit, but oftentimes you have
mm.
to tie it first degree first, second degree, third degree. As soon as you get to that third degree, there's a lot of influencers, and it's the reality of life that
Yeah.
a call center agent for a shipping company is going to have
Mm,
very little to do with, is this client going to be retained? Is this customer going to be retained? Is this customer going to be more profitable? In this
yeah.
case, when they're calling the call center, they already have a problem. They're already
Yeah.
asking for a refund. They're already, like, things are already wrong. So,
Hmm.
trying to tie that to a call center agent, I think is unfair for the call center agent. And
Yep.
it was really unfair in how they were trying to make that connection, just
Hmm.
because they were 1% of what had to happen in this business. The business had to be, hey, I got your supplies, I got picked it up on time, I dropped it off on time, and I kept you notified throughout. I mean, that's the key of any shipping company. But in this
Yeah.
case, they were saying, well, this call center agent, if something goes wrong, this call center agent should be able to retain them and make them more profitable. And I mean, that's
Yeah.
one of my, it's an easy example because it happens like that. But
Yeah.
all too often, we try to nitpick some of those, and that also goes along the lines of the employee experience as well. Sometimes they go, well, I don't think making happier employees is going to make us more profitable. And I'm like, whoa, wait a second, you're
Yeah.
you're just assuming a single employee that may only have contact with 100 customers a week isn't going to make that difference, but it's
Mm,
more than that
mm.
single employee.
The largest. Yeah.
Multiply. You saw the $14.53. Multiply that over hundreds of thousands of transactions a year, and
Yeah.
multiply it over thousands of stores, and it makes a big difference.
Yeah. Yeah. No, absolutely. Right. And even having, sessions and learning from your stories and having sessions like this, it just gets them to rethink what is currently being evaluated in the company, right? Just gets the
Exactly.
wheels turning. What else are we missing out on? Should we be including this as well? So I think this has been a great show, great insights, just to get the wheels turning, right? Just to get them
Yeah.
thinking, okay, what else do we need to do in order to make sure that we've got the calculation down
Start
right?
small. It doesn't have to
Yeah.
be. It doesn't have to be our Caesar model that we showed.
Yeah.
It can just
Yeah. Yeah.
be, look at an area that needs improvement, and is there a benefit to that improvement?
Absolutely,
That's it.
absolutely. And if there's nothing else you took away from this, just know right at the top, if you have a slide that is so complicated that nobody can even read what is on the slide, just know that your
And you need
model
two
is,
slides for it.
you need, yeah, and you need two slides for it. Just know that you need to get back to the drawing board and see how you can improve that a bit.
Yep.
Any final thoughts, Ken, before we sign off?
No, just remember. I mean, I think one thing I'll always say, it comes from, there's all sorts of research on it, but Forrester once put out something that said customers are 2.5 times more likely to be retained if you do something about their problems.
Yeah.
And it's, when I talked about detractor recovery, that's right there. Everything you do from a customer experience standpoint has an impact on the customer, good or bad.
Yeah.
So make sure that you're doing it right.
Brilliant. Yep. All right. So just, there is a comment section at the bottom. Ken and I are happy to answer any questions that you have. If you have questions on how do you build this out for your program, right? If you want to get a little bit of an advice on the direction you should be taking, things that you should be looking at, feel free to ping us. Our contact information is there. We have LinkedIn posts up. Just get in touch with us, and we'll be happy to have that conversation with you guys.
Yep. Anytime, night or day, as you can tell.
Anytime, night or day. Yes, done. All right. Thank you so much, Ken. This was
Thank
a
you.
great show, as usual. And hopefully in 2022, we'll have you back on the show again.
And by the
We
way,
have.
before we sign off, I want to say everyone wish Shibani happy birthday. Coming
Ah,
up
yes.
next
The
week.
best time
So
of the year.
reach out on LinkedIn and wish her a happy birthday. And
Oh, that's nice.
yeah, and I look forward to speaking more in the new year.
Yes, wonderful. All right. Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for joining. Bye. Have a good
Take
rest
care.
of your week. Bye.
Bye.